So I'm Anna. I'm from Connecticut, and I'm a volunteer with Supermajority. And as a brief summary, Supermajority is a women's equality organization focused on ensuring we have an accurate representation in government, and that our issues are a priority for elected officials. So because women make up the majority of the US population, but if you look at Congress, state legislators, that certainly doesn't look like the case. And it's important for women to kind of come together in our votes to kind of make sure that our concerns are actually heard. So today, we're all here for two purposes. First, to kind of watch and take part in a discussion on gender and reality TV. With women panelists from RHAP, which I'm sure a lot of you guys are fans of. And then I will jot down some audience questions from the chat. So please participate if you want through the chat, much like most live RHAP podcasts. And we will try to get to your questions at the end of the discussion. So, and then afterwards, I will go over a few, kind of a review of what text banking is. And any tips and tricks to make sure that, it's a smooth process for everyone. And if you have not done so already, please check back in your email reminder. I sent a text with a bunch of links, and the getting set up with ThruText is a particularly important one. So please click that link. It really just takes a few seconds to give them your email and your name, so that you can kind of participate in the text banking session. And then we will debrief after we talk. So, all right, let's get started. I assume most, if not all, attendees are RHAP fans. So these panelists certainly don't need like huge introductions, but I guess I'll start off in alphabetical order. So we have Chantele from the class of 2020, also kind of serving as our Canadian representative for the evening. So Chantele, how are you? Say something to the audience for today.
So yeah, I'm great. I'm actually really happy to be asked to be part of this discussion. Even though I'm from Toronto, Ontario, Canada, my dad actually lives in Las Vegas. My stepmom does, and I have two half sisters that live in Las Vegas. So I've been traveling to the States since I was young, and so I know that these, like getting the vote out and getting people to be, active within, what their political power is that they have, is it really important to me because it does affect people that are in my family. So I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. And then we also have Liana, who many of us may have watched this morning on the live feed update. So Liana, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much, Anna, for putting this together, and for Supermajority for hosting us. I think this is going to be a really good discussion today. As people who comment about these games, Survivor, Big Brother, maybe less The Masked Singer, but still, like, gender dynamics are so incredibly important. And I think we need to acknowledge all facets of the game if we're going to have a well-rounded approach to discussing these topics. And so events like this, I think, really help to hammer home these points. So thanks again. Looking forward to tonight.
Yeah, definitely. And then we also have Lita, who has long been a really great advocate for women on RHAP and on Twitter. So Lita, I'm really happy to have you here as well. How are you?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be part of this event. Me and my pit bull, Cassie, are coming to you from Pittsburgh. I am super politically engaged. I used to work in voting rights in DC, so I'm really excited to be part of this panel. And I also wrote my undergraduate thesis on race and gender in Survivor. So this has been something that I've been interested in for a very long time. And I just want to say, Liana, I think you're underestimating the politics of The Masked Singer, okay? What other reality show has had like only Black winners? And when you can't see who they are, I think there's a discussion there for The Masked Singer. So next Supermajority event, I insist on being on The Masked Singer.
Awesome. I'll keep that in mind. And also another member of the class of 2020 who has been on a lot of Big Brother recaps and live feed updates this summer, Mari. Mari, it's great to have you.
Hi guys, I'm so glad to be here. I'm glad Anna reached out to me. I've always wanted to be politically engaged. never had the chance to really do it. And I knew I wanted to contribute, especially in this election. And when Anna reached out to me, I thought this is the perfect avenue, this perfect venue to do this. I can come on, I can talk for an hour. That's easy. So she did everything else. I'm like, okay, great, that I can do. And I just want to say this is like kind of like full circle, because this is the first time I've been podcasting or talking with Lita, and she was basically the person who kind of like steered me towards the RHAP application. It was her call for more like BIPOC podcasters that made me was like reach out to her and be like, hey, I'm really interested. And she's like, well, check it. They're doing auditions. And so it's like, it's full circle. I'm glad to be here.
Definitely. And then also last but not least, we have Melissa from the LFC, which is really exciting. How are you, Melissa?
I'm doing great. I'm very, very excited for this conversation, for, this whole event. And thank you so much for having me here. I feel like we touch on, gender and what it is like to be like a woman in the Big Brother house, and like what the fans think of a woman versus a man, and that whole idea of like who's a mastermind and who's, just like in it for a showmance. And I think that it's important to have more than just like touching on it in a podcast. I think that this is super important to have everybody talking about it, and not to mention the fact that, tying in the text banking with, getting more women involved in politics. I think that's so important. So, I've been super politically engaged, as you can probably see from my Twitter, for the past, ever since 2016, essentially, like even before that a little bit, but not really. And now I just feel like this is so important. And so it's really great that we're having this discussion today.
Yeah, definitely. So kind of to get started, I'm not sure what that green line is. Let's ignore that.
I thought it was artistic.
Yeah, sure. Let's go with that. Okay, so to kind of get started, I kind of want to explain why having this conversation is so important. I feel like sometimes we talk about representation when it's kind of inevitable, like whether you like it or not, like when it's obvious, the season of Big Brother, where all the women and people of color were being on the block week after week. On Survivor, how there hasn't been a female winner in 6 seasons, and then there's a million things you can talk about with The Bachelor. But sometimes these issues are less obvious as well, like the way certain competitions work or the way women villains are being edited. So I kind of feel like every single one of these subtopics warrants its own hour-long discussion, but we'll try to fit in what we can for today. So I kind of wanted to begin this discussion by unsharing my screen and also talking about casting first and foremost, which is where a lot of these issues start. So I think I'll start off by asking maybe Lita first, and then the rest of the panelists can respond and discuss. Lita, when you look at these issues in casting, whether it be for Survivor, Big Brother, Bachelor, what's one of the bigger issues you see and why these shows are unable to really represent women accurately or fairly?
Yeah, so I think there are a few issues at play here. There's a bunch of them, and I'm sure the panelists will talk about some other ones, but I think the major ones are the diversity behind the camera. So those who are casting, if they are all white, it might not even occur to them to be looking for, a certain amount of people. And beyond that, just they get into the mindset of, well, we can only have X amount of people who are like this. We can only have X amount of people who are from this background. And they get to that mindset of checking boxes rather than seeing the people for who they are. And then I think the other major thing is just, I'm going to speak to Survivor because my fellow panelists are definitely more Big Brother people than I am. But with Survivor, you have a lot of slots in most seasons, especially the earlier seasons, that seem to be reserved for sort of the bikini babe and not necessarily people who have a great shot at winning. So while men have archetypes too, there are like the hot guy and there's like the nerd and stuff like that. All of those people generally have a pretty good chance of winning, whereas they cast a certain amount of women that they don't expect to win. Now, sometimes it happens. Sometimes they'll cast a Parvati and she's one of the greatest of all time, but they're not casting these women to win. So that automatically brings it down to like, maybe there's one, dumb buff guy that they cast who's not supposed to win, but then there's 3 women. It already brings down the ratio. And so there's all of that combined with the fact that I'd love to turn it over to one of the Big Brother people to talk about this season, just combined with the fact that if you are the odd one out for any reason, you hit that beach and you're the only Black person there, literally any reason to be voted out first is a good enough reason for the tribe.
Yeah, I think I had pointed it out on one of the most recent updates, but when you have a cast that, especially like if it's Black women, you have one Black woman, you have two Black women, you have a minority, that minority has to play the perfect game. That person cannot mess up because you're already at a slight disadvantage because you're not like everybody else. And especially in Big Brother in the most recent seasons, we've seen that a lot of the big groups tend to all be like white, or they all tend to come from the same background. So if you don't come from that background, then you're automatically at a disadvantage, and then you can't make mistakes in the game. You try, you fumble, that's when they get you out. So casting in itself is one aspect, but I feel like something in the game itself is inherently broken. And I thought that with this All-Star season, since these people had already been through it, we wouldn't see the same type of things that we've been seeing, but we're still seeing it. So I'm starting to kind of wonder, what is the actual problem with the game itself? Or is it until society changes, the game will remain like this? What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I think that we all thought from my experience, we all thought that this season was going to be different in a lot of ways. I mean, in terms of not falling for the mistakes that they made in the past, and now they're literally repeating themselves. So, it's been very frustrating to watch because, the past few seasons of Big Brother, I feel like they've all kind of gone the same way, and they've been very, very similar, and we can kind of predict it, just super predictable. And I thought that this season coming in was going to be totally different because these people have played before. Like, we shouldn't be seeing that same thing. And it did seem like, what's interesting is it did seem like the cast was different than usual. Like, we had older contestants. We didn't have like younger contestants going there. We didn't have people, it seems like most of the time in recent years, people have been cast to be in a showmance. Like, they try and get they specifically ask for single people. Like, the people who are casting, they go to their Instagrams, and we've seen screenshots of it. They go to their Instagrams and they say, hey, like, we're looking for hot single people to be on this reality show, and it seems like you fit the bill. And it's like, that's not what you should be looking for. Like, Big Brother used to not be about like hot single people. That wasn't what it was. If you're trying to cast like The Bachelor or whatever, then go ahead, look for hot single people. But it seems like Big Brother shouldn't be focused on that. The casting should be focused on putting because here's the thing, is it's the difference between like the real world and Big Brother. Big Brother isn't supposed to be like young MTV people. It's supposed to be like society and what happens when you put people from society and different walks of life together, and what happens. And we're not really getting that anymore. So I do think that casting plays a huge role in why we don't see strong female winners necessarily all the time in Big Brother. I mean, we haven't seen one in a while, in my opinion. So it's frustrating.
Especially lately, for what you said. Like, a lot of women lately in Big Brother, just like the Survivor format, a lot of women have been cast for showmances. And so that is very frustrating. Like Lita said, they're casting women for showmances, and then they're casting people who've actually watched the game. And it just makes the pool shallower for a woman to actually win.
And I feel like the people who aren't cast to be hot young single people to get in showmances, the people who aren't cast for that are just like, okay, we need one older mom, and now we need one quirky girl. It's like, that's what you get. And so those people aren't going to fit in necessarily. Like, if you just cast one of each, you're not going to get them working in the big group. It doesn't work that way. So it's, just because they say there's diversity because they cast like one one person of color, one quirky girl, one nerdy guy, and then that's not diverse. Like, that's not reflective if the rest of them are like hunks. It just doesn't make sense.
I also think them throwing in these wild cards of people that are not actually super fans kind of makes it be possible for these big majority alliances to start, and then those other people, so usually other that clusters together, are going to be the minorities and maybe the people that are the outcasts. And I think that that's also really problematic within casting, because it allows people just to become just a numbers game, and that no matter how much strategy, how great they are as players, they never really get the chance because they're not part of the popular cool group. And so I think that that's one of the biggest, one of the main problems with casting, is that, you know, not everybody's there for the same reasons, not there for the game. And so then they just go back into what's natural and comfortable, where they place themselves in society. So if that's part of the cool kid group, and that's where they're going to all conglomerate together, and then other who are really there to play the game really don't get an opportunity or a chance to do so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. And then also, you guys kind of touched upon this in like a lot of your comments. Like, I think also transitioning into the experiences of these people on these shows. We also have a few audience questions that kind of tie into like the experiences of women on these shows. So I may interrupt when appropriate so that we can get to those. So Mari, I'd like for you to kind of kick this one off first. So just like plainly, do you think that women have a more difficult path to win or get to the end to make it far in these games than men?
Well, from my point of view, the most recent seasons, like say the last 5, 6 of them, yes, because there's been more emphasis on the big group, the big male dominated groups, and the competitions over those last 6 years have gone more physical. Like Taryn, Melissa, Brett, they've all talked about it for years now. These competitions are getting more and more physical, and it's playing more and more to the strengths of those young men. And so it's harder for women to get to the end. I saw a question, I know we're going to get to it later, but like with women alliances or women who stick together, if you notice early Big Brother, a lot of those seasons that were won by women, they did have a huge like female alliance. Was it an all-female alliance? Maybe not. But was it a large cluster of women? Yes. Think of BB6 with Maggie and her coven. You know, think of BB11 ended up being female dominated because they had the foresight to start getting rid of the men early, you know, about midway through. So whenever women are consistently like working together, at least we tend to see it end up being a female winner. And then, I mean, we'll get into female versus men at the end and all of that. But typically, if the women at least stick together a little bit, they can have a chance. And like I said, these modern seasons, like Melissa said, these modern seasons have been more casting of more women who are more willing to follow a man's lead than not, which is fine for your everyday life if you want to, but this is a game for $500,000. Like, don't follow anybody's lead but your own. You know, that's what you want to see. That's what we as an audience want to see. We want to see somebody, you know, go in there and try and win. We don't want to see somebody go in there and then follow behind somebody else. So I just think that's the experience. Women have a more difficult path now because of the competitions, and then if they turn on each other early, they make it even harder on themselves.
So I think, reality TV obviously encompasses a number of different genres. If we're focusing here on Survivor and Big Brother as a whole, the way that I see it is you can kind of break it down into a number of different components. So one of them is the game inherently itself. So things like competitions, like Mari is talking about. I think that's something that can be an obstacle for certain types of people. There's also the casting, which y'all were talking about before, the input into the system that can inherently disadvantage women and people of color. But I think also you have to look at societal behaviors as a whole and how that can disadvantage, women, because I think I remember reading an article, and this was a while ago, but it was about leadership styles on reality television. And they were focusing in on an analysis of The Apprentice, which is obviously problematic for multiple reasons. However, I think that there are parallels that you can draw to Big Brother and Survivor as well. And this pains me to bring it up, but our very own Rob Sesternino, in his ranking of winners of Survivor when going through TEOS, has a clear priority over who he thinks is a better winner based on traditional societal stereotypes of leadership. So I think that that's something that we also have to keep in mind, because it disadvantages the women who are trying to play the game and be successful. And that's why the women's alliances seem to be something that is advantageous, because if a woman can't succeed being a leader of men, but she could succeed being a leader of other women. And I think there is one example that I always think of breaking that system, which is in Survivor Australia. There was a woman who, she's a CEO of her own company, and she was able to be the godmother of Survivor in that episode of that series. And it was so empowering to watch, but she also was portrayed with certain male characteristics. So anyway, so I think that yes, there is the bias of the game itself, but also just how we examine masculine and feminine qualities and how that can disadvantage certain players.
Yeah, I think the societal factors is really important, not just because it impacts how women play, but also how other people on the season will perceive how they're playing. So women generally win with less flashy gameplay, fewer idle plays, especially in Big Brother. Recently, the way to win as a woman is to get to the end with a man who played a bigger game and hope people are mad at you. And that is a way to play, and that's a perfectly valid way to play, but it's a way that if the people end up not being that mad at the other person, there's no way around that. Women can really only win against other women playing like that. And I think that there is just sort of like an ingrained sense of empathy and guilt in women from a young age. It is absolutely hammered in women to be caretakers and to, I think, just not lie, and there's no dismissal of boys will be boys with our behaviors when we're young and make mistakes. So I think that there is an internalized guilt that makes it difficult to play. And again, this is a huge generalization. Obviously, there are women who can overcome this, but just from a young age, we are expected to be caretakers, whereas men can kind of have their behavior dismissed as like, oh, it's just a game, he's just playing. So women aren't able to really go full throttle without like feeling guilty or harming their friendships. And in this world, especially with Big Brother, where you can now become like a social media celebrity, like if you want to get on Big Brother because you want to quit your job and sell bathing suits on Instagram, you're not going to have as many followers if you are evil. In a lot of situations, it is more lucrative for a woman to like come in 5th or 6th and be America's sweetheart than it is to come in 2nd and be hated, or even 1st and be hated. So I think with the challenge as a possible next step, with social media being what it is, especially with Big Brother, I think there's a lot of incentive for women to not play very harshly.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that what you touched on there is really important too. It's like, even if we get a strong female player who is a mastermind, who is being ruthless, who is owning her game in the DR or whatever, you're not going to get, you're going to at least, maybe you'll get like the true fans or whatever, like hardcore fans being like, yes, we love this. But for the most part, especially with like the casuals, they're going to hate that. Like people don't like that. Oh, we've got to unmute someone. I'm hearing stuff. There we go. Sorry, I was like hearing stuff. I thought it was me. But for real though, it's like the audience isn't going to like that necessarily. It's like you get such a negative, like a bad rep because you are like ruthless. Whereas a man could do the exact same thing, say the exact same stuff. And because he's a guy and because that is something that everyone is used to and everyone is comfortable with, people will be like, yes, that guy is a mastermind. Whereas a woman could be seen as manipulative, but in a bad way, not manipulative in a good gameplay way. And I've seen that happen. Look, all right, we all can have our issues with it, but even Dani on this season, like she had a classic, like I'm a mastermind sort of DR persona, and people hated it. For some of them, I loved it, but a lot of people didn't like it and thought that it was, maybe it's not true, but I like that sort of confidence in the DR. Sorry, that was my dog with a giant toy. Anyway, that was not me just making a weird noise. Right. Sorry. Anyway, back to what I was saying is basically that the way that it's perceived is not the same if a woman does the exact same thing as a man.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I didn't even think about that. I'm learning things too, because you're right, because women should be able to win and still maintain a femininity or a less dominant posture. But like you said, it is more looked down upon because of society. And especially what makes me think of this is especially in Survivor, since we don't have the feeds in Survivor. So all we have is what's presented to us by the editors. And it just makes me think of Parvati, how she is always presented as the ultimate Black Widow, sexy, stunning. And a lot of people love it. And then there's a section of people who really hate that and always say she used her body, she used this, and that. You know what I'm saying? So I didn't even think about that. I love Parvati. And then you have on the other spectrum, you have Chrissy from Heroes, Hustlers, and she lost. She played the most dominant game on that season and lost. And and then the whole season she was portrayed as a villain, not a mastermind, a villain. She got that mastermind villain, but mostly they leaned hard into villain. And I didn't really like that, because I didn't like that whole season, to be quite honest, but I really wanted her to win because I wanted somebody who actually played to win. And then for Mike to win because they valued his comeback story more than her dominance is very annoying, because we know if that was a man, the man would have been rewarded with that win.
I think another example that I really not love, because obviously it's not great, but is Cass and Tony from Survivor Cagayan, right? So Cass flips, Tony flips, but the fan reaction is very different. The player reaction is also very different. And I think that this is an area where we can start to really make a difference, because we can recognize this ourselves. So what Melissa was alluding to with how we talk about certain players' gameplay, how we perceive them, how we perpetuate that as a fan community, we can help to hopefully break through some of these issues. With things like casting, I heard wonderful ideas on how to fix the problem from the rest of the panel. Stuff like this is much more challenging, I think, to overcome, because it's so inherently ingrained in our own society at large, and it's just much more challenging to deal with. And so being willing as a commentator and as fans, as people who are talking about the game, to just look at it from this different perspective of why do I hate this? Why, but why though, right? And being able to question that. And it doesn't make, when we are, so not to ramble, but when we become critical of these types of things, it's not because we don't like them. It's not because we hate Big Brother or we hate Survivor. It's because we want better out of them. We want better out of society. And so we want to be able to be critical in a productive way. And I think that that's what conversations like this are hopefully hoping and helping to accomplish.
Yeah, I have one more comment on this one. I'd love to hear from Chantele. But I feel like we as commentators, there has been sort of a stigma, at least I used to do a lot of Big Brother updates, not so much anymore, but something that I was always really criticized for was sort of bringing the players' baggage into the house with them. And I don't think that we need to be afraid to do that. So when I'm talking about, someone like Bailey, and on her first season, she had a huge blowout, and a lot of people were very critical of her. And I was like, hey, listen, she has a lot coming into the house, being the only Black woman and all of this stuff. And people really criticized me for that. But I think when we're talking about from casting all the way through when it airs and we comment on it, I don't think it's a bad thing to consider the baggage, because even when you look at Survivor, what we expect people to be really influences how we see their gameplay. So even when it comes to broaden this to something like sexuality, Survivor has been lauded for having a lot of LGBT representation. So we had a trans man. Our first winner was this super complicated gay guy, but where are the lesbians? Where are the Black lesbians? Where are the Black queer people? Where are the trans women? It's very much we can accept identities behaving a certain way to a point, We can accept certain women behaving certain ways based on what they look like. Are they young? Are they hot? Or is it a mother? And then that's unacceptable. When it's an LGBT person, is it a gay white guy like Todd who's sassy and bitchy, and we're cool with that? But when it's a more complicated person, if it's a lesbian like Amy in Vanuatu, we're like, what? She can't be mean like that. She's representing a community. So I think we all need to like really take a look at what our expectations are for those people, and try to let those go as much as possible, like considering their backgrounds without getting upset when they don't match what we want them to be.
And kind of similarity to that is that, we have our expectations on how women are supposed to play the game. And so if they come out as this like master manipulator, we don't like that, because we don't like seeing that quality maybe in a woman. And I know that I've had that problem sometimes when I'm watching things. I'm like, why don't I like how this woman is playing? It's like, oh, well, I would never want anybody to see me act like that, and people have this perception of me. And so I realize that I'm projecting a lot of times of how I don't want to see a little bit of part of me and how I might be, react in certain situations be played out in this woman, because if I don't feel it's like positively representing me, and then I guess women on a whole after that. And so I think that that's what the biggest problem is that we don't necessarily like women using particular characteristics that are maybe easier for men to use. We don't like seeing women use them, because I don't think we like seeing ourselves in those other women that are being represented.
We have an audience question that I think, actually we have two audience questions that kind of fit into this. So one, I guess it kind of fits into like what we've been saying, but why do you think women make up the majority of pre-jury boots in shows? In Survivor, you at least have this like cheap excuse that like, oh, physical competitions, whatever, and then that's like what you plaster on. But what about when Big Brother, where women are often targeted very early for no other reason? I mean, you don't have to depend on someone's like physical dominance or whatever. Like what can be the reason for that?
My thought process for that is normally, do we have an old person on the cast? No old person to go out first. Okay, so all of the physically normally attractive women, are they on our side? Yes. Okay, so who do we have left? Okay, the women who don't necessarily fit those pretty norms. So let's throw them on the block, and whatever happens. Like, to me, that seems to be the case. It's always the older person first, like no matter what. And then it's like, okay, so who are we not attracted to? Because 9 times out of 10, the first HOH is normally a man. I don't have the statistics on me right now, but my God, it's always a man. And then like Taryn has went over, once you win the first HOH, you garner power to you. The power comes to you. That's who you pick and choose who you want to work with. And then that's who you get the automatic, who's on the other side, or just maybe if it's a person who has rubbed everybody in the house the wrong way. Like, it just seems that women are some early boot options, especially if they are not tied to the larger power structure. And then if the larger power structure is a man, then it's all of the women who don't fit with him, or the whole rise of the guys alliance within the last 6 years or so, 8 years or so has done them in. Like, we went from seeing strong male players target each other to teaming up. And once they team up and they're off limits, then it just comes down to the women. It's really unfortunate. I just think the way that the game has progressed has made it more likely that a woman is going to go out first. Again, barring there's no other older person.
Yeah, I mean, I think also like you said, I mean, usually the first HOH is a man, and I think that's mainly because the first HOH is usually something physical. Because usually that's better for TV, and they're hanging on a giant hot dog or something, and whatever, and that's like usually won by a man. And so first of all, I think that you have a guy and he's looking at the other people, and I think that if he targets another strong guy, I think that is a riskier move, quote unquote, for him, because he's like, okay, well, if I don't target them, they have a better chance of winning, and then they won't target me, versus like these women who don't have a good chance of winning HOH or winning any competition. So like whatever, like let's just get them out because I don't feel they're a threat to me. And especially the first week, you know, they're looking for an easy out. And I think that number one, they're expecting the women who are typically cast to be there for like showmances or whatever, to not be able to like blow up their game or do anything crazy that will like cause any repercussions on them, versus a guy who might be able to win veto or whatever and go against him. I think that, you know, like we're seeing, the guys usually try and team up nowadays. So the guys team up, they pick off the women because they're easy, and then they're going to duke it out or whatever moving forward. So I think that definitely has something to do with it. And the competitions, like I'd much prefer, I used to hate the random competitions, like the, you know, crapshoot ones. I used to hate them because I was like, well, that just like, you know, it could be anyone. It doesn't mean anything. There's no skill involved. But now I'm like, give me more crapshoot competitions, because that's literally the only way that someone in a minority group or whatever or minority in the house will win. You know, it's just like, it's crazy at this point. So I don't know.
I think it's also not just about threats, but it's also about what they perceive to be valuable. So someone like, you know, y'all were alluding to, but someone who wins competitions, I think in Big Brother, it also plays a part, just like it does in Survivor, of you want people who are going to win and be strong physically.
Mm-hmm.
And if you perceive women to have a lower value, especially certain types of women that you feel like, oh, well, they're not going to be as loyal to me. They don't look like me, they're not going to pair up with me, right? Then that can also be a detriment. Because I was actually super curious. I did the math on the Survivor stuff, and, you know, even though it is still a 45, so for, you know, if you have 100 people play Survivor, women will be the pre-jury 55% of the time, men 45% of the time. So it's not 70-30, but it's statistically significant when you compare each individual season, which indicates a trend. And it's something that has been happening throughout the course of Survivor. But Survivor also has issues, of course, with winners, which I think we have a question about.
Yeah, I was going to transition to that.
Before you transition, Anna, just really quickly, I also want to just build off of Liana's comment. I had to do the statistics with the p-values and all of this in undergrad. It is incredibly significant when you break it down by race. So basically, women and men, white women and white men, it's not a huge issue in Survivor in terms of pre-jury, but when you break it down into women of color, basically as long as you are a white woman or a man of color, you'll be okay when you separate those out. So people don't often think that there's a racism or a sexism problem, because when you look at them separately, it's okay. But when they interact, when you're a woman of color, it's like very, very difficult to make jury.
I think Lita, your statistic, I actually was so curious about this. It was, I think you found that 45% of the women of color were voted off in the first 5 votes, which is like mind blowing.
Yeah. And that was up through season 30.
Yeah.
I did this in 2015 or so.
What I was also thinking with, you know, just women specifically being voted out pre-jury, I think it seems to be easier for other women to vote out other women. Like men will be like, nope, I'm not voting that person out. They'll just put their foot down, they'll say no, and everybody will be okay with them saying no, that this person is not going to be voted out. But if it's a woman's just going to be like, okay, well, at least it's not me. And they will allow, you know, their numbers just to dwindle because it's not them. And so I think that, you know, women just tend to not want to put their foot down and stand up for another woman. Maybe it's a fear of, you know, being in an all women's alliance and having a target on you. But it seems as though, you know, as long as it's just not me, is a pre-jury kind of, you know, response to playing the game that women seem to have.
And, you know, speaking of the all women's alliance thing, like I brought this up before, but like the reason I think partially why the all guys alliance does better than the all women's alliance usually is because the guys don't call it an all guys alliance, and their main like source of like kinship is not just they're all guys. Like they bond over other things, and then they're like, oh, okay, cool, like now let's move forward as a group. Whereas the women are like, we need girl power, which is like the one thing that binds them together when they literally have nothing else in common. And so it's like, I mean, there are obvious exceptions to this, but it does seem like that is typically the way that it's formed, is like, we need to have an all girls alliance. And then of course that gets taken through the house and people are like, if the women are banding together, and it's bad. You know, I bring this up every time, which is the Ball Smashers was an amazing example of a women's alliance that didn't, I mean, forget the name, but they didn't bind together because they were women. They became together because they were friends and they hung out together and they had a good time. Then of course they, you know, used the name Ball Smashers, and now my point seemingly goes out the window. But the point is that they were friends, they were together, and they did a great job. And I think it proves that even in modern seasons of Big Brother, women can join together and do well, as long as the one thing that connects them isn't just that they're women, you know?
Yeah, the Ball Smashers are also another great example of how when women work together for a majority of the game, they tend to win the season. However, the main reason why I was not a Ball Smasher fan is because the Ball Smashers basically came together because they were bashing a woman of color. So I was very, very, very put off by the Ball Smashers, but I did like the fact that they were able to work together successfully for a very long period of time, and they used those men precisely how I would have wanted an all-girls alliance to use those men that were protecting and shielding them and then getting rid of them. So I will give them props for that. But yeah.
Look, that was a divisive season. We all know it. I mean, that was the craziest I've ever seen Twitter. Like at the time, was just like everyone was hating on everyone, and it was just like, oh my god, it was. But you know what? Looking back on it, like that was the way you want a season to go, where you've got one side versus another side, like, and they're going after each other, and they're both strong sides, and they both have good players on each side. You know what I mean? Like versus now, it's like you have two sides, sure, on the first week, and then like one by one, that one side gets totally decimated. They get pagonged, you know. So
it was a great season. It was a great season, and it was my introduction to BB Twitter. Like I got on BB Twitter because I was following OTT, and it was amazing.
That's so funny. It was crazy. I mean, that was the time we were doing So You Think You Could podcast, Liana. Yes. So that was even worse, because it was like everyone was pitting everyone against each other on So You Think You Could podcast, and it was just like a total nightmare scenario, because you already have Twitter going nuts over Big Brother OTT, and then you've got them also like using that like rage and animosity towards us, and it was like, oh my god. Class of 2020 is lucky you don't have to go through that.
Right. And luckily I started listening to RHAP right after OTT, because I was on Twitter and I heard they were like, RHAP likes the Ball Smashers and Recaps likes Late Night Jamboree.
It literally was then like podcasts. It was like literally fans against fans, podcasts against podcasts, like people against podcasters. It was like, oh my God, it was wild time. It was like the Wild West, but yeah, good times. Oh man.
Okay, so we also have
back on topic.
I know, it's totally on topic. So there's one audience question from Andrea. Can we discuss the string of the last 6 Survivor winners being men? So many people chalk it up to being a coincidence, or that the women in the final 3, like Angelina, Nora, Julie, didn't play winning games. So, but she feels like it's more than a coincidence. I mean, Angelina, Nora, and Julie were not the only women to play Survivor these seasons. So I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
I would love a season where Angelina, Nora, and Julie are the only people to play Survivor. That's my ideal season. Yeah, it's not a coincidence. It's very much, I think, where Big Brother like never has all-star seasons and everyone complains about it, Survivor has way too many. And I think just tying this in to the discussion of Big Brother All-Stars, who's Survivor casts for All-Stars, they do it in kind of a shallow way where, in Big Brother too, like the greatest example of that is Big Brother being like, oh crap, we need Black people, there's all these protests, David, I guess, because like, who else? There's like no Black men that have ever played Big Brother. So what else are they going to do? And I think the same thing happens for women in Survivor. There are definitely some people who have been on these recent All-Star season, and when I say All-Star, I'm also including whatever season Aubrey and Joe and friends were on. God, these last 6 seasons have kind of been a blur for me. But there are some people that you'll see on it who are men who you're like, oh, okay. But there are way more women who are cast that you're like, really? Like Sierra Dawn Thomas is back? Like, okay. So in a lot of the All-Star seasons, it's because they're casting men who have an amazing chance at winning and women who did not prove themselves as a player the first time. And the only time that's really worked out is for Kelly Wentworth once, and then couldn't really repeat it. Like, they're not casting women who prove themselves as winners a lot of the time. And even winners at war, because you have fewer women to choose from at the beginning, like, I don't think anybody went into that season being like, Danny Boatwright is going to crush it. Like, I think it starts from a casting, and then yeah, the rest of it is just very like what Melissa was saying about like guys forming alliances that probably don't even realize that they're all guys alliances, with maybe like a Denise sort of on the bottom of it. They're just sort of like, this is the group that naturally came together. And then just the fact that it is very hard to plead your case as a woman in a jury against men, because you are playing a more subtle, more finesse game. You're not playing the dominant game that Rob Sesternino is going to rank the top game, because otherwise you'll be seen as too sneaky, too much of a threat. And just the last point, I don't want to ramble for too long, is just that women are often seen as kind of like pairs with men. Like, there's sort of like a man who has like a sidekick, and that's always the woman. So if she makes it to the end, it's impossible to plead her case. And if she doesn't, it's probably because so few idols are found by women, because you know, there's a million reasons for that, but they're more risk averse. They're expected to be near the camp. People are more suspicious of them anyway, all of these things. When you want to weaken a man, you vote out his white hand woman, because she probably doesn't have an idol statistically, which is true. I mean, that's just smart gameplay, but it sucks. And it shows that Survivor is pretty broken with how unbalanced the idol finds are. So that's a gameplay mechanic that has to be fixed, because it's too easy to vote out Amber instead of Rob and let Rob get to the end.
Well, and also you seem to respect the gameplay of people that you played with. So if most of the women have gone out pre-jury, and the jury is made up of mostly men, and there's a man in the final 3 seat, you know, the men chances are they're going to want to vote for him, especially if they've been playing with him and they know his game strategy and they've been doing things within maneuvering the game together. They can see his game and they can see why he could win, and they can also see themselves sitting in that position, and they would want to be the winner as well. So I think it's also very hard for men to vote for a woman, because they wouldn't want a woman to win against them if they were sitting beside them in the final seats.
Dalton Ross wrote a really interesting article before Winners at War on why men keep winning Survivor, because he noted that, I mean, at the time, I think it was from Cara Moen on. So I think it was 11 out of 14 of the seasons had been won by a man. And then that also continues with Survivor Winners at War. But the jury votes are, I think, the thing that's most interesting to me. So sort of to touch on the points from Chantele and Lita, but the statistic is that even though men make up 58% of the finalists, they receive 80% of the jury votes, where women have only received 20% of the jury votes. And that has gotten worse, especially over the past 6 seasons. And so I think that goes back to, what do you value as a jury member? How is it that you perceive the woman and how she's played? And so I think that's a fact. Like, that's a statistical fact that we can talk about when we discuss all of these more nuanced issues. So I think that all of these things probably play into why women's games aren't valued in the same ways as men's.
A lot of these topics bring me back to the last 2 seasons of Survivor. What was it, Island of the Idols, season 39, where we saw on the very beginning, there was a girls alliance on that first tribe. What was it, Missy, Elizabeth, Chelsea, you know what I'm saying. There was a girls alliance. Then they wanted to take out Dean. It came down to between Dean and Chelsea. Chelsea was in their girls alliance, and they voted her out to weaken Dean. Like, that to me, that was like why are we doing this? Why are we here? That is one of the most frustrating things to me, is women being voted out because they want to weaken the man, and basically nothing that their gameplay. Like, if I ever went on any of these reality shows, if you're going to vote me out, I would much rather you vote me out because I did a misstep, or, you know, you see me as a big threat, than to say, oh, I have to vote you out because I want to weaken him. Like, the ability of players to gamble with women's game lives like that is so throwaway and needs to really change. And then at Winners at War, like you said, when it like Liana said, when it comes down to what the jury perceives more, we had Tony, who played a very dominant game from the beginning. He was never on the wrong side of a vote. Basically, he drove the season. We had Michelle, who fought and clawed and clashed and did everything she can to get to that final. And then we had Natalie, who did all of that stuff to get to the end through Edge of Extinction. They gave it to Tony because he played a dominant game. But I really think that if Michelle had been the more dominant person and Tony had scratched his way to get there, I still think they would have given him the win, because it always seems like the narrative of a man who had everything going up against him and still made it to the final, like, that's worth giving the prize to, next to a dominant woman, like I had pointed out early. Like, we really need to address these biases and think about them, so that if we address it beforehand, we can really think about it when they're like in the jury and when they're making that decision. Because I really feel like we see that way too often. It's like any excuse to give the man a win. It seems like we'll give him the win.
So I have a few counterpoints to that, because I think we need to be cautious about making assumptions with how we think people would be perceived and behave, because I think then that's where we get sort of maligned as like, oh, but they're just making up stuff, blah, 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 right? But I think you have a valid point, Mari, when you say that the way that Michelle versus Tony would be perceived, I think look no further than Chrissy and Ben, right? Because that's a perfect example of Chrissy, who played a dominant game, Ben, who was scrappy, made itself to the end, and Ben was the one who ultimately was given the vote. So I do think that is a pattern that we potentially could have seen, even though we don't know for sure. And then with Dean and Chelsea, I believe it was a smart move to vote out Chelsea potentially because she was such a smart player, whereas Dean is, Dean. But I do think that there is 100% validity in saying that when you have a man and a woman pair, that it is, we see this often time and time again, that it is still the woman that is targeted. So, I think that's where we have to address all of these sort of little nuances when we talk about specific pairs and specific points in time, because I think that really helps us to better understand holistically what happens to women in Survivor and Big Brother.
I also think,
sorry, I didn't want anything to be blanket state. I didn't really want blanket statements, but you're right, Liana. I do need to think a little bit more before I say stuff like that. But
no, that's why we have a panel, right? Like, because your your sentiment was there. Like, I agree with you. I just, that's why we have the counterpoints. But sorry, Lita, go ahead.
Well, I just also think the premise of like they voted out Chelsea and that was the right move because she's such a smart player. I'm sure that that's true, but the antenna being up for that woman is too smart that early, it's like the second or third vote. It's like, don't you want smart people on your, like, there's a puzzle in every single challenge. So the idea of like, that woman has 2 brain cells to rub together, we must get her out before the merge or she'll, decimate all of us. It just doesn't happen to men. Otherwise, Cochran would have been the first person voted out, or Steven, or any of the men who look like, a smart person, whereas you see Missy, a Black woman, write tally marks in the sand, and they're like, she's got a beautiful mind, she's doing calculus, we must get rid of her. And it's like, it's more just that, it's not that these women aren't smart, it's that if you show that you're a little bit smart, you just don't have any room to get out of it like you do when you're a man.
Which is also why I think people, or women really, like, I mean, guys do as well, obviously, but I do think like there is more often women will lie about their professions on the show in order to not be seen as super intelligent or smart or whatever, and because they know what people are expecting from a woman and they want to try and meet that rather than, let everybody know that they're actually really intelligent or whatever, and they try and play up that they're not. Not that guys don't do that as well, but I do see it more often in women, just because, like, if a guy has a good profession or whatever, like, people are like, okay, cool, that's great. But if a woman comes in there and is like, I'm a lawyer or whatever, they're like, whoa, okay, so this girl's really smart. I did not expect that. And so it's just kind of like, it puts an automatic target on their back.
Yeah, and also, I guess, tying into this, there's another audience question that's VV related, but I feel like could be also applied to others. Are women able to be perceived as masterminds? What would it take for a woman to win and be among the greats like Dr. Will, Dan, Derek? Because those who are usually considered female legends in Big Brother are non-winners like Vanessa, Danielle, and Janelle. So what do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I was actually going to ask a little earlier and I forgot, but like, when was the last time we had a female mastermind? Like, I mean, people can say like, well, Vanessa's really good, but she wasn't perceived as a mastermind necessarily by, by the all of the fans, by the casuals and the like super fans alike. Whereas I do feel like Derek, Dan, and Dr. Will are all perceived by everyone, essentially, like, quote unquote everyone, including the casual fans, including the Facebook fans, that they are the mastermind, they are masterminds, they are legends in this game. And I think the last time that we had a woman be considered that would be Danielle Reyes. And even then, I think a lot of the casuals don't know who she is, and a lot of even super fans probably don't know who she is because she played so long ago, And so I'm wondering, like, I can't even think of the last time a woman was considered a mastermind at Big Brother besides her.
I would say Maggie. I think Maggie had I would consider her a mastermind. She played her side like a fiddle. I think
but the fans hate her.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say.
So, like, I mean, it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, yes, like, people who watch the show or whatever, like super fans, people who analyze the show could be like, yes, this person is a mastermind, but like, they're not perceived that way. They're not edited that way. Like, they're not given the credit.
Well, it's because the mastermind, like we said, in women, that's not what the audience wants. Because that mastermind can easily, for a woman, be flipped to manipulator, and people don't like that. Big Brother fans tend to like they said, like, Rachel and Janelle, they want the fiery white woman who wins a lot of competitions and speaks her mind. That's what we have tend to like in the past. But if like Lita said, if a woman shows any type of smart, she's normally gone very, very early, minus Vanessa. But again, Vanessa's edit as well was very, I remember not liking Vanessa when I first watched. I was like, just because I didn't like her using her emotions to manipulate people, but then also not really own up to it, like what Nicole is doing this season. Like, Nicole should be considered one of the greatest Big Brother players to play, but because she refuses to own up to her game, because she refuses to step into that kind of, I'm here, I want the money, I will do anything for the money role, it is very off-putting for people, especially like me, to me, because I just don't like this whole this act of I'm nice, I'm sweet,
I'm a good person.
Yeah, let your house guests think that. I'm fine with that, but don't try and make me believe that, because I see you.
It's literally even she it's because she's an influencer. It's because she makes money off people liking her. I'm telling you, this is
totally. But I mean, so the one thing though is, like, can she win either? Like, can she win in the view of the audience either way? Because if she doesn't own up to her game, people are like, oh, she's not owning it, she's lying, she's she's pretending to be sad, she's doing XYZ. But if she owns up to it and pulls a Danny and is like, I'm the mastermind, I'm this and that, are people going to like that either? I mean, I know we would, but I think the majority of people watching Big Brother would hate her. And I think a lot of people, I mean, at least like when I look at the Big Brother, the comments on like the Big Brother Facebook, which like I highly recommend nobody do, but I like to see like what the casuals are thinking and like what's really, what's being said outside of our little bubble. And they hate Dani. Like they think she's mean. So like, it's one of those things where it's like, can you win? You're either going to be, like you're going to be fake and you're going to cry and not own your game and we're going to be upset, or you're going to own your game and say you're a mastermind and you're going to be considered mean. So like, it's frustrating because I don't see that happening with guys. I think that they have a lot more reign to, be considered like devilish or whatever, like, but women can't really do that, or else they're just considered manipulative and mean. There's no winning.
I think absolutely part of that is like how you perceive the players, which is like an inherent intrinsic bias. I think also part of it is how the editors choose to portray particular characters like that. Dani got pretty much nothing empathetic or softening to her character, whereas people like Cody and Enzo do, right? So they still have those like mastermind segments that Dani, she got like, oh, I'm running this, I'm doing that, but then there's nothing else to it. It is a truly simplified, like hyperbolic profile of what this person is supposed to be, because it is almost a caricature to a lesser extent. It's not as well-rounded. And so I think that that's also part of the reason why the audience will perceive people to be, and women to be certain types of way. Because like, yes, on the Big Brother B&B, like we go into the comments, we do the casuals corner. I've seen how horrible some of these casuals are to people like Dani and Davon as well. Davon especially was like,
they're like, thank
horrifying.
God she's gone. It's bad. I was shocked to see it because I thought she'd be a fan favorite just because she's so fun in the DR and she's, got such a big personality. I thought people would love it, but it's scary in there.
Yeah, it's almost like nuance is hard to deal with, right? People just want to completely vilify when they don't like something from someone. And the same care is not given, I think, to certain female characters in the way that they're edited versus men.
I think inside and outside of the house, we are just more easily ready to forgive a man than forgive a woman for wrongdoing to us. You just be like, I'll never forgive her. And you're always going to be mad at her for something that they may have done. But if it's a guy, if he says it nicely enough, or he bats his lash, whatever he does to charm you, you're definitely going to be like, okay, fine, I forgive. And so it's just, I think that we just don't really want to forgive a woman for doing something wrong, especially if they do it to us. We just don't seem to want to do that, whether we're a man or a woman. We don't like forgiving women for hurting us in any sort of way, or, manipulating us, I think is a form of maybe hurting us. And so I think that that's why it's been really difficult for women to get the mastermind edit or whatnot, is because people don't like feeling wrong done by a woman, and they don't tend to want to forgive them, and then it becomes a bitterness between them that they don't get the vote in the end. And so it's going to be really challenging moving forward for women to get to the end, because I don't know what the path they would need to take without hurting someone that doesn't want to forgive them, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, definitely. And also I had jotted like 5 different audience questions. You guys answered like all of them during this discussion.
Perfect.
I think one that I also saw is, how do you root for someone like Nicole, whose entire strategy is to kind of, kiss up to the men and, do whatever the men want to do, but also understanding that like she is a woman in this Big Brother house who, has, a smaller woman, has the odds a little bit stacked against her in this house. So how do you root for someone like that in, BB18, BB22?
With great difficulty, I think. I mean, honestly, like I'm trying my hardest to just recognize that she has good gameplay. I mean, it's not necessarily gameplay we want to see, and she's not owning up to what she's doing, which is unfortunate. But she's still here. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, I always thought that her win in Big Brother 18 was just a total fluke. I didn't think that she played a good game at all. I thought she literally did nothing, and then people were just mad at Paul, so like they just like gave her the win, and that's really what I thought. Now I see that there is a lot more to it behind that, and she is doing things. It's just not necessarily stuff we like to see. It's not flashy, and It's not fun necessarily. But she is playing a good game. I mean, she is, and you have to hand it to her. She's still there, and she's a winner of the season. You'd think that she would have been one of the first to go. So I have to give it to her. And if she's the first 2-time winner of Big Brother, I mean, we're all going to have to give her some sort of credit. We wish there were different circumstances where she actually like would own her game in the DR and really just like, you know, just go head first into that, like, I'm a mastermind, evil doer, like, person, you know, that would be amazing. But, you know, it is what it is. Yeah,
for me, it's I'm sorry. It's not about not rooting for her because of her gameplay. Her gameplay of like sucking up to the guys and stuff like that, to me, I think that makes sense for her. Like, that's her game. I knew that was what her game was going to be coming in. For me, it has nothing to do with that. I don't like how she has treated the people who have been on the outs. That's my problem with her. I don't like how she talked bad about Janelle constantly. You know what I'm saying? I don't like how she treated Day and Bay. Mostly Davon when that whole flip happened. That's the thing that would be hard for me to root for her against. It's not her actual gameplay, but I again, it would be much easier if she again owned what she's doing to us. Like, just like, we can see you. Like, I really didn't like that whole practicing for what she was gonna say to vote out Ian thing like that. I don't like stuff like that. That's her gameplay is fine. It's the stuff outside of the gameplay that's really turned me off personally.
It's the way she's trying to control her image. That's what I don't like, because it feels it's all fake, and it all feels like it's just there for, like Lita was saying, the influencer profession. I mean, that's what she's doing. I mean, you could see that, like, she used to. It's interesting. She like went in as like a nursing student in Big Brother 16, then Big Brother 18, she's a nurse, and Big Brother 22, she's an influencer. Like, I mean, that's where she gets her money, and that's like what she cares about. It seems like that is why she is here, and not because she wants to be known as like a Big Brother legend or anything like that. It just doesn't seem like she cares at all about the Big Brother fans. It's that she wants her own Instagram fans, and that's part of the problem of Big Brother lately, and that's what we've been saying, you know?
Yeah, I think I also, well, and not to sound like a Nicole defender, but I mean, holy crap, I was a huge fan of Nicole on BB18, but she is, it's been harder to root for her this season, not because of her gameplay, like Mari said, but because of just kind of a lot of the comments that she's made. But I also want to challenge ourselves to, like, where we are this panel of feminists spending all this time, you know, analyzing how we can root for Nicole, picking apart what she's done wrong, whereas like the men in the house have also been absolutely horrible. And I think one of the problems with being like, even in Nicole's case, who is like a conventionally attractive white woman, like the burden of representation for her should be pretty low, but because there's very few other women left in the season, we're looking at her and being like, we as women want to root for her, how can we do that? So we end up dissecting her game in a way that we wouldn't necessarily with men. So I think it's worth obviously having these conversations of like, what is Nicole doing wrong? Why don't we like her in the context of feminism? But I think it's also easy for men to kind of get an out because we're like, oh, Cody, well, he just sucks. We don't need to talk about what he's doing wrong. And so I think you end up seeing a lot more criticism of women because we're holding them to a higher standard because we want to like them in a way that men were just kind of like, oh, well, he sucks. And that's why I spent all of BB18 talking about how much I hated Paul, because it's like everybody is just letting him be, you know, this way while we criticize Nicole all day. Not that people didn't criticize Paul, but I think that they are probably a great person in real life. But I think that when there is a polarizing woman on the season, all of the attention gets thrown towards her.
Mm-hmm. I think for me though, like I love playing games. I love strategy games. I'm playing at least one game a day, and I like working with women. Those are usually the people that I bond with, I get along with. I've always had a best friend. Like, I like hanging out, talking to, and working with women. And so I think that my biggest criticisms comes with the women that I've been seeing on these shows lately, is that they're not someone that I would want to play the game with. I don't want to work with them. I don't want to play with them. I don't want, you know, and And that's what's really like frustrating for me to watch, is that I'm like, man, I want to root for the woman, but she's not playing a game that I want to root for or that I want to play with. And I think that is where I'm coming from when I'm kind of breaking apart Nicole's game. I'm like, yeah, sure, she's playing a masterful game if you take away this, and this, but like, would I want to be in the house and play that game with her and be like conspiring with her? Like, no, I don't want to play the game with her. And so that's where my frustration comes with Nicole, and even with Dani. Like, I was rooting for Dani in the beginning so hard. I wanted Dani and Janelle and Davon to work together, and I'm like, oh, I would want to work with that trio. That would be like so amazing. And then when everything just started falling apart and Dani was playing a game that I didn't want to play like or with, then it's just like I didn't want to root for her anymore. And so I think for me, that's where I come from with how I judge the other women that are playing the game.
Totally.
I mean, I said all that saying at this point I want Nicole to win. Like, like honestly, like Cody is horrible. I don't want him to win. Would I prefer him to win over, say, Enzo? No, I think I prefer Enzo than Cody. Mostly because I don't know. Like, everybody in that house is horrible. I'm sorry.
I'm worried that he'll give money to Polly, and I can't live in that world where Polly has any more money.
Everybody in that house left is horrible, but at this point, I think my rooting list is Nicole, Enzo, Cody. But I think Lita's right. I think I could probably sit here and critique Cody's game as well. But I also think that Big Brother themselves have been shielding him from the audience. If you think of the edits of this show so far, I think it's been mostly female dominated, and a lot of it is not good for what we're seeing. We're seeing the Dani villain edit. We're seeing this shield, this bubble for Nicole and make her look cutesy, and then we got a lot of Davon and Bailey because they were carrying that show on their back. They basically kind of just let Cody just slide by and let him be like the person who put this together. At this point, they're making Memphis the mastermind. So it's just like, I think what I've come to think about through this whole panel is, who are the editors? Like, we need to get more female, person of color, like more queer representation behind the camera, especially in editing, because now that we sit here and talk about it, I'm really thinking like our emotions are being manipulated through the editing, even less so with Big Brother because we know the 24-hour feeds, but not everybody does. Like we said, those casual fans don't, and it seems like women are getting a harsher edit than men across the board.
That's actually a really good point, and I had never thought of that before, so that's actually really good.
Yeah, I feel like that's also a really good note to end on. I literally feel like we could talk about this for like hours and hours, and it would still be like entertaining and insightful and everything. But I think we could transition to the text banking now too. So yeah, just give me 1 second to share my screen, and also like thank you guys so much for this, and thank you to the chat for being like really engaging. So give me 1 sec.
I'm very excited to text bank. I've never done it before, so I'm very nervous, but also excited.
It's awesome.
It can't be worse than the door knocking I did in the previous 2 presidential elections.
Oh yeah, I did door knocking. I did door knocking in the primary, but the door knocking was actually not bad. I was so nervous at first, but it really wasn't that bad.
Lucky you.
But
traipsing around like, rural Michigan in the snow in October.
Oh God, yeah, no, mine was just LA. Not so bad.
Cool. So I guess I'll start by saying, so text banking is a method of voter outreach that Supermajority uses to get information out to women voters. So by now you all should have received a link for ThruText. If not, I will also send the link again in the chat after I finish explaining. So today our goal is to get 30,000 texts sent, meaning that if everyone here took on 2 batches, that could be reached or even exceeded. So that would be really cool. I'm just gonna not even do presentation mode because whatever. So today we're texting women in Pennsylvania who are voting for the first time in a presidential election. So don't worry if you're not from Pennsylvania. I'm not either, but it's the state that was assigned to me by Supermajority, and it's an extremely important state from an electoral college standpoint.
Very important.
Yeah, I mean, so the Electoral College, low key sucks, but it's what we have to work around right now.
It high key sucks, yo. Like,
yeah. It's super high key sucks, and we need to get rid of it.
Yeah.
So Pennsylvania is worth 20 electoral votes, and the difference between Trump and Clinton in 2016 was only around 44,000 votes, which is crazy. Like, we could, in an ideal world, like literally contact that amount of people right now, which is kind of insane.
That's so crazy.
Yeah. So, I mean, I say this as a soft warning, but direct voter contact, like what we're doing in text banking, is not perfect, neat, or easy. You'll be sending at least 300 texts, which is actually not that much because you send them out in around 3-ish minutes, like you just click, 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 and only a fraction of those voters reply back. So most of the people who respond to you will say that they want to opt out of your texts, which, you have to do when they ask. And a lot of them will be wrong numbers, which is something that you kind of have to indicate on, in the system. However, if in your 300 texts you provide even one person information they need to vote absentee, vote early, or even just like provide them a link to the Pennsylvania Secretary of State website, like that is a success. Like that's something that they didn't have before. So like I mentioned, you should have already received a link to set yourself up with ThruText, but if you haven't already, that's literally fine. I'll send you the link in the chat after I'm done, and it literally takes a few seconds to just get your email and your name in. So once you create a link, and also once I'm done speaking, I will drop another link in the chat labeled Get Texts. So when you click that link, a list of 300 voters will populate for you, as well as an initial text to send, which has your name and all the voters' names. So all you really have to do is click send 300 times. So you just make sure the name looks good. It usually does, but this will take literally 3 minutes to do. So once you're done with that, the initial replies will start popping up. So to reply, you kind of look at the script on the side of your screen on ThruText and click whatever seems best. You're allowed to kind of edit the script as you see it fit. And as long as the main information is there, you're all good. So like, for example, some of the scripts say like, may I help you make a plan to vote? And I personally feel like that sounds a bit awkward. So I changed the sentence to be, please let me know if you have any questions. And I feel like that's a little bit more open-ended, and they can kind of ask me whatever they want if they do have questions. And then you can also, you can basically just send the scripts in as they are, change them, your choice. And then when the conversation is done, make sure you fill out a survey that is on the side that identifies the voter to the best of your ability. Like some of the questions will stay empty just because you don't know the answer to them. And that's totally fine. And then you can just archive the message when you're all done with that voter. Oh, and also I will share this presentation with you all once I'm done explaining to have like all this information. So we also have a few notes to kind of keep in mind. So one, the people you're texting are real people. So, feel free to put some personality in your text so that they know you yourself are also real and not a bot. Two, also, like I said, be prepared for people not being interested. So like, while this is nonpartisan outreach, Supermajority is a more progressive organization. And if someone is typing Trump 2020 in all caps to you, that's probably not someone who's very receptive for what we stand for and likely doesn't care about what we have to share. So, if they're rude, we do have a kind clapback response you can use, but also feel free to just opt out these rude people and call it a day. If someone is pro-Trump, but, they're nice, we do have responses for that. We do make a note, but you don't have to send them the usual voter information if that feels weird for you. We do archive non-rude, overtly Trump responses just in case their stances, change in the next month. But yeah, you don't feel the need that you have to engage with someone if you feel like uncomfortable doing so. I'll also skip to number 4 here, which is very important. If someone says stop, please stop texting me, F off, like I will report you to the authorities for if you text me again, like any of that kind of stuff, just opt them out. It's whatever. You will never be in trouble for, texting someone. Like what you're doing is completely legal, but no need to kind of, get these people involved again. And then number 5, as part of our nonpartisan outreach, we're not here to like persuade voters or vote a certain way. I mean, Supermajority has endorsed the Biden-Harris ticket, and we're introduced in the text as part of Supermajority, a women's equality organization. So the stance of the organization is clear, but the campaigning is left for the individual campaigns to do. And then also, finally, I'd like to say that a lot of these numbers will respond with, I've moved, or, this is a wrong number. So unless they say something like stop or don't talk to me again, you can engage with them if they're civil. Like you can operate under the good faith that they are, somewhat aligned with Supermajority's mission. And sometimes people say some things like, I don't live in Pennsylvania anymore, but I live in New Jersey or something like that. And in that case, you don't have to do this, but like I'll link them to the New Jersey Secretary of State voting website or like whatever state they're from. Like, just giving them something, so it's not just like a dead conversation. So we'll get started right about now. First, I'll go through what to do if you have questions. So in these next 20 minutes, if you have a question, just send it in the chat and I'll try to get back to it as soon as possible. Also, there's not like, a crazy amount of people on this call. If you feel like you want to unmute yourself and ask me directly as to, how to answer to a specific person, you can do that and then we can just talk it out. And then also if you are someone who you feel comfortable text banking, you know what you're doing, like you can mute the Zoom and, just come back to the Zoom when you're ready and when you have a question. And, also, I don't know, I'll leave that for later. Okay, so let's get started. I will stop sharing my screen so that I can post the links. I'll also be monitoring the chat for any questions. Feel free to unmute and talk to me if you need to. And then please come back like in 20 minutes at 6:50 so that we can kind of debrief and talk about any good or bad conversations we've had. If you feel like you've zoomed through your first batch of 300 texts, like I strongly urge you to, request 300 more. Like that's, if you feel like you're in a groove, like totally recommend doing that. And then there should be a button on your ThruText page to do so once you've kind of gone through your 300. So good luck. I will stop sharing and share links in the chat right now. Okay. Sorry, that's like a big block of texts. If you want to copy and paste that into like your own little side things, that's all good.
Let's see.
Also, I just want to say this is a great conversation. I'm glad everybody was here. I learned a lot just talking to all of you guys, and I really wish we could have gotten to a lot more stuff, but I think Taryn, Sharifa, Sosa, they did a really good podcast about diversity in reality TV. It was about 3 months ago. Lita, sorry, Lita, my bad. I knew it. I was like somebody else. Lita, y'all did a really good diversity in reality TV podcast. So if you guys haven't listened to it, go listen to that as well, because that's a great companion piece to this.
I'm really nervous to send the first message. I just have it up on my screen. I'm like, send.
Where will we see the responses? Is it obvious?
I think it'll be in the chain with them, right?
Yeah, it'll just look like
a little blue dot will pop up next to their name if they've responded.
Yeah.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. And yeah, this is not the end of the conversation, just the beginning for these conversations.
Has anyone pressed send yet?
I have. I've been flying through them.
I'm just literally hovering over my first one, just okay. I sent it.
I'm so proud of you, Melissa.
Thanks, guys.
I'm from Pennsylvania, so I'm looking at all these to see if I know anyone.
Oh my God, yeah. What if your name was in here?
Very not a first-time voter. Although this might be my first presidential in Pennsylvania. I was registered in Michigan for the last presidential election. Can we get some tunes, Anna?
Oh yeah, that's a good idea.
I will try to do that. It's sometimes difficult.
This is so crazy.
It's so weird. Like I'm just like sending them out. I've been getting so many text messages from like campaigns or like, I don't know, like props and stuff like that. Being like, are you voting for this? Vote yes on 22.
I was going to say yours are probably so much more specific because you're in California. Mm-hmm. We have constant Trump and Biden ads here in Pennsylvania. Really? Yours are probably like, okay, like, we know who you're voting for. Yeah.
We know. They're just like, yeah, it's literally focused on just the props, basically.
Oh my God, that scared me. I wish, I think somebody, somebody named Chris is using my number as a fake number and giving it to all these like fake places. I keep getting all these texts like, hey Chris, come renew your Apple subscription.
That's so funny.
Mari, that actually might be someone who had your phone number before you. Or they may have like, or if it's like voter specific stuff, like it literally, like these voter files are so outdated and inaccurate, like it's actually very painful. It might be someone who has your phone number, but like one digit different.
So that's the thing. So it's nothing about voting. It's always like these like deals, come do this before this happens. So I'm like, okay, that's a spam or something. Yeah. But I've had this number for 15 years.
That's crazy.
And it just started doing this, like in the last 3 months. So I'm convinced, and my number is kind of,
someone might have just like sold your data and gotten the name wrong. Like, I mean,
that could be it. But my number does sound fake. If you knew what my number is, you would think it was.
I was like, don't say it.
I'm not going to say it.
Like, this is my number.
Liana knows it.
I have my work phone. I get texts all the time thinking that I'm a guy named Joseph, and they're all like about either CBD or dirty stuff. And I'm like, this is my work phone. I do not want this on here.
Okay, sorry. I will try to turn music on.
Amy in the chat says their number was 6969. That's so funny. Ew.
Yeah, so we're just gonna like debrief, and I'll leave you with some final thoughts. So I don't know, does anyone have, I know we were all like talking like over Zoom and through the chat, but does anyone have like a really good conversation that they want to share? Since we've had a lot of like really ridiculous replies.
I got a yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got a yes from someone who moved or who lives in New York. So, that's, good. Not Pennsylvania, but,
Yeah, and like
it was a nice, pleasant conversation.
Yeah, and like I said, for those, I usually just like, like send them to the Secretary of State website or something.
Yeah, I got some people that said, thank you, I'm going to vote in person. Somebody was like, oh, I live right next to my polling place. I'm going to vote there, but thank you for, for checking in. So that was nice to hear.
The Supermajority is really pushing the mail-in stuff, which for Pennsylvania, I kind of, personally, I understand if they are like hesitant about it, given the Trump like attacks on them and all that. And usually it's those people that are like, I don't want Trump messing with my vote. So I get the concern there, but
my plan is to do I was going to do mail-in, but because I always do mail-in, but I was going to do, actually I usually do in person, but mail-in, but I'm going to drop it off at the location. So that way I know it's like with them, but I don't have to like wait in line or whatever.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess that is all for now. I guess one major thing I should share, we talked about it previously, is that some people may be texting you in the coming hours and days and whatnot. So it won't be too much, but you will get emails from ThruText saying that like 4 or 2 people are waiting for replies from you. So I would just like everyone to, monitor your email and, make sure you just reply to those stray like texts here and there. And yeah, I'd also like to thank everyone here for participating in the event. First, I'd like to thank the women of RHAP who joined me, Chantele, Liana, Lita, Mari, Melissa. Like, this truly would not have been possible without you all. Like, I'm really thankful that you guys were interested in participating and promoting the event. And then I'd also like to thank everyone who attended and took part in asking questions and, of course, sending texts. I don't know how many texts were sent and how many, will be sent from, this group. But I hope that information will be available in a follow-up email. And then I truly think these events will make a difference. I always note that Supermajority is not the only organization doing outreach like this in Pennsylvania and battleground states. There are literally dozens, possibly hundreds of organizations doing things like this. So honestly, I'm cautiously optimistic about what voter turnout will look like in this upcoming election, because of all the effort that's going in around it. So also, if you'd like, if you liked doing this and you'd like to find new opportunities to kind of participate in text banking parties, or you're interested in doing phone banking, this link on, this slide has all the events you need. On Tuesdays, Supermajority does phone banking sessions, which is super important. And then on Wednesdays, we do text banking. And then also on a final note, I'd like to share that for Saturday, October 17th at 5 p.m., I am planning a similar discussion and text banking party with a few of the women behind the Bachelor Diversity campaign, which should be fun. I mean, I don't have an event page up for that yet, but I will probably send an email to everyone who is here once it's up, in case you're available or interested or whatever. So again, thank you so much to everyone.
Thank you so much for having us, Anna. This was awesome.
Yeah, this was great.
Yeah, thank you so much, Anna.
So fun.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you guys.
Definitely learned a lot.
And I feel like I have so much more I want to say, and I feel like I want to talk about these things right now.
Sending texts
over. And I was like, oh my God, this literally should have been a 3-hour conversation.
If only we all had access to some sort of podcast feed where we could have these discussions.